Now let's talk about Saudi Arabia. It is deepening ties with China. Today they've signed a deal to trade in their native currencies and sideline the US dollar. The deal is worth almost $7 billion and it's valid for 3 years. This is basically a currency swap agreement, a financial contract between the central banks of China and Saudi Arabia. And this is what it means. Henceforth, China's central bank will maintain a reserve of the Saudi riyal and the Saudi central bank will keep China's yuan. So when a payment needs to be made, these banks will just use the native currencies. The Saudis will settle their bills in yuan and the Chinese will use the riyal. It's a win-win for them. So who is the loser? The US dollar.
China and Saudi Arabia have been trading a lot lately. Since 2013, China has been buying a ton of oil from Saudi Arabia, making up about 21.7% of all the oil Saudi Arabia sells abroad. Even though China usually has more money coming in from trade than going out, it actually ends up spending more money on stuff from Saudi Arabia than Saudi Arabia spends on Chinese goods. And there are reasons why China wants to build good diplomatic ties and do business with Saudi Arabia. And this is where China's brilliant strategy comes in. And in this video, we will talk about why China wants to build good diplomatic ties with countries from the Middle East. But before we do that, subscribe to our channel so that you will receive more interesting videos just like this one. Number 1, it is about de-dollarization. The petrodollar system has been a crucial aspect of the global economy since the 1970s. It emerged when major oil-producing countries, particularly those in the Middle East, agreed to price and sell their oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, these countries received military protection and support from the United States. This arrangement led to a high demand for dollars globally, as countries needed dollars to buy oil, effectively making the dollar the dominant currency in international trade and finance. Now, if this petrodollar system were to collapse, it would mean that oil-producing countries start accepting other currencies or even cryptocurrencies for their oil exports. This could happen due to various reasons, such as geopolitical shifts, changes in energy markets, or a loss of confidence in the stability of the US dollar. If major oil-producing countries decide to diversify their currency reserves and trade agreements away from the dollar, it could lead to a significant reduction in dollar usage. For example, if Saudi Arabia, a key player in the petrodollar system, starts accepting Chinese yuan for oil sales, it could encourage other countries to follow suit. Economic instability, high levels of debt, or inflation in the United States could erode confidence in the dollar as a reliable store of value. Investors and countries may seek safer assets or currencies, leading to a gradual shift away from the dollar in international transactions. However, it's important to note that the petrodollar system has been in place for a long time and has a lot of influence. Even if there are challenges or changes in the system, a complete collapse would likely be a slow process rather than an abrupt event. Regardless, if China wants to surpass United States, it will have to end the dollar's hegemony. And to do that, the petrodollar has to collapse, as crude oil is the world's largest trade commodity. And for the petrodollar dominance to stop, it will have to start with Saudi Arabia, as the kingdom has significant oil reserves and play the role as a major global oil exporter. Number 2, it is about becoming less dependent on the US dollar. Recently, China has been trying to make it easier to pay for oil from Saudi Arabia using Chinese renminbi instead of US dollars. This way, if there are any financial problems or sanctions, China can keep buying oil without as much trouble. Even though only about 7% of global trade uses RMB in China, more and more deals are being made with RMB, about 23% of total trade. So, if we look at how much oil China buys from Saudi Arabia every day and imagine it's paid for in RMB, it could add up to about $15 billion every year. But remember, These are just estimates. The important thing is that China has set up a system to make paying in RMB possible in the future. By using RMB for oil trade, China can make sure it keeps getting oil even if there are problems with using US dollars. This is important because China doesn't want its money or the money of Chinese companies to get frozen or blocked by other countries, especially during a crisis or if things get really bad. China's leaders are worried that without a good way to pay for things, they might not be able to get what they need, especially during a war. If China can keep using RMB to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, it can avoid some of these problems. The more China and Saudi Arabia trade using RMB instead of dollars, the less they have to worry about US sanctions affecting their oil deals, even though the dollar is still the most important money globally and oil prices are mostly set in dollars. This is why China's leader Xi asked Saudi Arabia to start accepting RMB for oil payments. He even talked about using digital currency and new ways of trading to make this happen. Saudi Arabia seems open to the idea of using RMB, which is becoming more popular globally for trade and finance. The RMB is now used a lot for international payments, trade financing, and exchanging foreign currencies. The Chinese government has done a lot to make it easier to trade in RMB, like setting up banks in Saudi Arabia that can handle RMB and creating a commodities exchange where people can buy and sell oil in RMB. If Saudi Arabia starts getting paid in RMB for oil, they'll end up with a lot of RMB that they can use to buy things from China. For example, they might hire Chinese companies to build stuff, like the new city project in the desert that Saudi Arabia is planning. This would make it easier for Saudi Arabia to be part of China's Big Belt and Road Initiative, which is all about connecting countries through trade and projects. Saudi Arabia can also invest the RMB they get from selling oil back in China. They're working on ways to do this more easily, like getting permission to invest directly in Chinese companies using RMB. Some big Saudi companies are already making deals and expanding in China, which could help both countries grow their economies together. In summary, China aims to reduce its dependence on the dollar and promote de-dollarization through its partnership with Saudi Arabia. Riyadh stands to gain by forging stronger ties with China, allowing for diversification without excessive reliance on the United States and the US dollar. What are your thoughts on this perspective? Feel free to share your comments below. If you enjoyed the video, show your support by liking it and subscribing to our channel for more engaging content like this.